Welcome then to episode 17. It's been a while since we've been doing these videos, but we're back now, and this time we are going to be looking at positive framing, how we can frame language with students to basically get the best out of them in lessons. Let's get into it. So in this week's episode, we're looking particularly at how we're going to frame language and talk to students in lessons. If you're still struggling to deal with students in lessons, in terms of asking them to do things and they're being non-compliant, we need to think about the language they're using. One of the things, if you look at Paul Dick's book, when he talks about when adults change, then the children will essentially follow. I'll put a link in the description. He says about the expectations got to be on the adults to control the situation. Sometimes when staff get into problems with students, with dealing with them, supporting them in their behaviour, one of the things they get bogged down with is they expect the students just to change without actually changing what they're doing themselves. And it's a tough one, really, because yes, to some extent, students should just behave themselves. They should just do as I'm told. But the reality is, unless we model the behaviour, unless we give them examples, they're just going to refuse. They're going to say, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to engage. And we have to change our behaviour to try and meet them. Where people get confused is two things. Often when people talk about behaviour, they'll say, well, they're not doing something, and therefore I just want to give them punishment. If we just look at a punitive route in terms of, like, say, they've not done this, so let's punish them, that's not going to change their behaviour. That's where people go wrong, is they think if I punish them, they'll just change. Now, for some students, that will work. It will work because it's a deterrent. But for some students, they genuinely, when they turn around and say, I don't care, they genuinely don't care. So just by issuing them a sanction, you're not actually going to change anything. All you're doing is punishing them, and then they'll repeat the offence. The trick, really, and where people struggle with this, particularly when emotions, because emotions go into behaviour quite a lot because it's how we're treated by students. It does affect our emotions. We're human beings at the end of the day. But what happens is a student does something wrong, and we want to kind of have this kind of retaliation to some extent of, well, I need to have something happen to them now because they've undermined me. And I get that, but that's where you need to step to one side and kind of shut down the emotions and say, what do I want as an outcome? If I just want to punish them, then that's fine. Just have a punishment system, but you're not going to change behaviour. What you need to do is you need to be thinking about, I want them to do this for this reason. It's that beginning with your why, going back to the Simon Sinek stuff I've talked about before. If you understand where you're coming from and what your why is, you want the outcome. If you're just going into it and you just want to sanction, you're not going to change behaviour. And sometimes you have to almost sacrifice that in order to get the behaviour that you want. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to be soft. We talked about being warm and strict before. What it means is you will do whatever it takes to get the outcome because that's the most important thing that you want. If you therefore have to still issue a sanction, that's fine, go ahead. It doesn't mean that we have to be soft. It doesn't mean that we have to kind of give in to students. So, example, I was dealing with a student recently who had the phone out in the corridor. We banned phones. The student's got a lot going on. There's stuff going on at home. Father's not well, etc., etc. And so wanted to check her phone to see, what was going on, whether there'd been any information. And she's just wandering down the corridor with a phone out. Now, I could easily just turn around and say, right, you've got your phone out. That's a detention. That's your warning. That's your sanction. Take the phone off her, etc., etc. But what I did was had a conversation with her. Said, right, you're not helping yourself because phones are banned. Phones need to go away. Phones need to go away and put it away. What I need you to do is check it, and then we're going to hand it in. And then if you need to come and check it later, you can come and find us and we'll support you with that. It's that compromise. What do we want as an outcome? We don't want the phone to be out. What do we want to make sure it doesn't happen in the future? She doesn't have the phone out again. Have I achieved that? Yes. So by having that little compromise, and it's such a fine line, because I know some people will listen and just be like, no, we don't give in to students. They should just do as they're told. And I agree with that to a certain extent. But when there's extenuating circumstances, you have to understand where they're coming from and work with them. It doesn't mean that we give in. We still expect them to meet our standards and follow our rules, but it's working with them. Now, don't get me wrong, if they say no, then you can turn around and say, well, look, I'm being reasonable, I'm taking into consideration the things that you've said, and what you're doing now is you're just point blank refusing, and then you can escalate up to say, well, I've been reasonable, you're now not following expectations. And that's where people go wrong, is they think you can't go down that route. They think about when we're giving in and we're giving them that support, it's just about saying, well, just let them do what they want. It's not. It's about thinking about the outcome that we want. So coming back to the positive framing, when we're going back to the classroom, the first thing you've got to do with anything is establish your expectations. And we've talked many, many times about this before in other videos, because behaviour is just repetitive patterns of trying to establish routines and making it clear about your expectations. So you just set that out really clearly. So basically, when you're starting your lesson, and it can be in a lesson, it can be in a corridor, like I said, dealing with someone with a phone, but let's just use the lesson as an example because that's where the majority of the behaviour is going to take place that we need to challenge because of the learning. essentially, if a student's refusing to do as they're told and they won't just get on with things, the first thing is you've got to set out the expectations, make it really clear. Okay, when you come in, I want you to do this, this, and this. If you want to have a checklist on the board, if you want to make it really explicit, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with signaling and having those expectations, having them up on the board. But how we frame that is really important. What we don't want to be saying is, you will not do this, you will not do that. Think about how you're going to frame it in a positive way. So rather than saying things like, you shouldn't have your coat on, just say, when you come in, we expect you to take your coat off. The language is so important because children will pick up on that. How you talk to them and how you model your own behaviour will influence them. You have to remember, particularly with challenging students that come from difficult backgrounds, for them, the adults in school might be the only kind of good sort of behaviour that they will see modelled for them. So if we're kind of mirroring what they're seeing at home, if they've got, parents that might not quite be kind of demonstrating the positive behaviour that we'd expect to see for various reasons. Again, I'm not going to get into criticising parents, but as the teachers, we have got to set that example, because we might be the only adults that they come into contact with that are, shall we say, a bit more disciplined in our own practices. So it's important that we model that. So we establish your expectations, be really clear about what you want to see. You can't punish someone, you can't deal with someone if you've not made it clear what you want them to do. And overemphasize it. Don't just say like, oh, I've said it once, that's it, tough, you just need to do it. If they don't understand, it comes back to the kind of one of the ones later on, is you assume the benefit of the doubt. So explain the expectations, be really clear, go through them step by step, have them up on the board, whatever it takes, have them as a PowerPoint slide at the start of your lesson. So these are the expectations, that we're going to meet them. And then what you want to do is you want to then affirm the positive responses first. So in other words, those people who do the right thing, well done, thank you for having your uniform off. Well done, uniform correct, not off. Well done for, tie or shirt tucked in, well done. And particularly make notice for anybody who has made changes and has come in. I particularly do it if I'm walking around the school and I see someone really smart who's not normally dressed that smart, and the shirt's not hanging out, the tie's not on, and make a big fuss of them. You might say, well, hold on, we should be making a fuss of everyone. Yes, you can do. But just make a particular fuss of them to big them up and build them up, and use language like, I expect better of you, so that idea of you're building them up, you're saying you've got potential. Never kind of cap them, never limit them at saying this is all you're capable of, or you can't do this. Sometimes I hear people, hear a lot with parents, unfortunately, use negative language of like, oh well, you're only this, you're only that, or that's what I expect from you, you're the one who causes the most trouble in the lesson, you're the one who disturbs everybody else. That sort of language, just that negative language, you're just reinforcing what they already think that you think. In other words, you're confirming it. They're saying, well, he thinks I'm rubbish anyway, she thinks I'm rubbish, so, and now they've just confirmed it. Well, I might as well be rubbish then. Whereas if you turn around and say, look, the behaviour that you're exhibiting at the moment is not great, I need you to do this because I expect you to do that, because I know you're better than this. I need to see the best version of you. And that's a phrase I use all the time. See the best version of yourself. You're not comparing it left or right to anybody else. We're talking about you being better than you were yesterday. And it's just a great philosophy in life anyway. So we affirm the positive responses first. In other words, well done, thank you, well done, oh, fantastic, these people got all their equipment out. I'm going to make sure I give them some positive points here because they're just ready. We use the ready, respectful, safe. So they're ready, they're respectful, they're safe, they're doing all the things, they're ready to go. That's how we start off. Then if we need to deal with any of the issues to reinforce things, then we're going to frame the correction in a positive kind of way in reinforcement. We're not just going to be negative. So it's going to be about, I expect everyone to have their equipment out. So we frame that in a positive way rather than just saying you haven't got your equipment out. It's like, I expect you to have it out. And also, when you're tackling them, when you're dealing with them, think about the language that you use that is almost like it's a foregone conclusion. One of the tricks that I use when I'm trying to get students to follow me is, rather than saying, right, I need you to go over there now, go and do that, is take the step forward and almost be like just kind of leading the way, sort of edging forward. So when you're framing the correction in a positive way, it's like, I expect you just to have your pencil case out. I'll come over in a second. I know it'll be done, so thank you. Almost like it's not even crossed your mind that it's not going to happen, because that confidence will be like, well, it's just expecting it to happen. They're going to be thinking, well, I said it, I've got to do it now. It doesn't work for all students. But that's what we need to do, is almost like in your mind it's just going to happen. The fact that it doesn't then happen can be almost like, wow, that's a shock, really. I just thought we were going to do that. Come on, I expect you to be better than that. This isn't the best version of you. Use that language. Come up with your own phrases or use the same ones, whatever you feel comfortable with. You've got to be comfortable with it. It's got to be kind of come from the heart. It's got to be sincere. If you are trying to, I think when you're looking at other people and you hear what other people say and do, you've got to make it your own, because students will sniff that out otherwise, and they will basically say, well, this person's not comfortable in what they're saying or doing, they don't believe in it, and they won't buy into what you're kind of selling, as I say. Then the next one's the most important. The amount of times I go to deal with staff and they've had an incident, and I heard someone the other day say this. It's just like, well, if no one owns up, I'm going to issue you all a detention and a sanction. And you're like, whoa, what are you thinking? Like, you've backed yourself into a corner there now. You've got to issue that sanction to everybody else. And I tell you what, you're going to get a ton of phone calls from parents saying, well, that's not fair. So never back yourself into a corner in terms of issuing sanctions and things like this. It's just silly. You make yourself look stupid. You make yourself look weak then because you don't follow through on it. So what you've got to do is you've got to say, right, benefit of the doubt. Say for example, someone throws something and it's something that might happen. So you're doing something, you're writing on the board or whatever it is you're doing, and something comes across the room, or you hear someone talking. That's probably a better example. Rather than turning around saying, right, you were talking. If you're not sure, never pick someone. Do not pick someone. Give them the benefit of the doubt, saying, right, there's a group over there. I know somebody's talking. I don't want to get the wrong person here. I don't want to pick on the wrong person. It wouldn't be fair. You know my expectations. I expect you to be quiet and to be getting on with your work. If you keep talking, it's going to disturb everybody else. They can't get on with their work. That's disturbing the learning of others. We bring everything back to learning. Always behaviour bringing back to learning. So there's a purpose and a reason for it. Never just turn around and say, I expect you to be quiet because I want silence. Because from their point of view, you go, well, so what? Just because you want silence, I should be silent. Whereas if you're talking about the learning of others, you say, look, when you're talking, you're impacting everybody else because they can't focus. We need that silent time to focus. When I teach maths, I often say when I'm going through a demonstration on the board, I insist on silence because I have to think, they need to think. Shouldn't be any talking, particularly when I'm doing that on my first demonstration, when I'm doing my I go, you go. And I'll put there'll be some videos coming out on PowerPoints and how to use those sort of things. I'm going to share some of those in some future videos. A lot of stuff been in the works over the last few weeks. I've taken a little bit of time off since I competed in the London Marathon, wearing my t-shirt. And so therefore it's about how we make sure we give them that benefit of the doubt. We're not sure. Challenge it. Doesn't mean we ignore it. We do not ignore the behaviour. We still acknowledge it's taken place. Look, I know somebody over there was talking. It's great that you stopped now, thank you. But that's the expectation from now on, please. If you keep talking, unfortunately, then I'm going to have to definitely work out who it is. And one of the things that I always like to think of is what you can do then once you've set that expectation, and there's a number of ways you can deal with this. One of the tactical ways that I will deal with something is someone keeps doing something, rather than looking like I'm getting frustrated, is almost ignore the problem for a period of time. And I'll explain what this means. It doesn't mean that we're not going to deal with it. What it means is you ignore it to the point that they keep doing it, so then you can catch someone. So if someone keeps chatting, rather than saying, don't talk, I've told you again, carry on. They keep talking. Don't talk, I've told you again. They will continue to do it, but they'll be so on the ball with when you're turning around and when you're paying attention, and you won't catch them. So what you do is you just ignore it. You ignore it, let it continue, let them build up, going, oh, he's not dealing with it. Let them talk. Eventually you go, right, now I've caught you talking. I did say before, I was really clear about my expectations. I'm really sorry. This is now what we're going to do. Maybe you didn't understand you weren't supposed to be talking, but I was quite clear about it. So here's your sanction. And again, when we're issuing sanctions, this is where people go wrong in terms of this positivity. You can turn around and say, you've got detention now, that's it. You're doing a detention for talking. Or you can just turn around and say, I'm really sorry. Unfortunately, because you kept doing what I told you not to, what I need to do now is issue a sanction because I need to make sure that, I provide that incentive to not do that again. So now you're going to have a detention tonight. Please make sure you go. Otherwise, there'll be consequences, and you can explain your systems. Notice how you can just say it calmly. Where people go wrong is they get really upset and they argue with the student. We'll do detention. And the classic one is they turn around and go, well, I'm not doing it. And then what do? We go, well, you will do it. When a student turns around and says, I'm not doing it, my best response to that is, that's okay, I understand. I'm just explaining to you that I have set the detention. The expectation is you go. At the moment, you haven't failed that. You still have plenty of time to make that choice. So I'm not going to get into that conversation, not going to get into that debate with you. And they'll kind of look at you and you go, there's nothing to, I call it the deflated punch back. They can't argue with someone who doesn't fight back. So if you just turn around and say, I hear you, you said you're not going to go, but I'm just letting you know that's what I've set. If you choose not to, that's fair enough. That's down to you. But the expectation is that you go. At the moment, you haven't failed to do that yet. You've still got plenty of time to change your mind. So I'll let you think about it. Don't get into a debate with them. Just be matter of fact. And if you do that with them, what you'll find is that there's nothing to argue. They can say, well, I'm still not going. Okay, I've heard you. Because they have, where again staff go wrong is they go, well, you will go. I'll make sure you go. And you just look stupid. Whereas you just turn around and go, okay, yeah, I've heard you, but hopefully you will make the right decision. Just be really supportive and just like, well, I'm hoping you make the right decision, but I'll leave it with you. At the moment, you haven't failed to turn up yet, so we're not going to get into that. So let's just carry on with the work, please. Or if you have them removed, depending on your systems, then that's fair enough. So That's kind of when we issue that benefit of the doubt and we talk about it. And then the last one really is that assume the confusion over defiance. So when you're talking to them, if you have been really, really explicit, it's not confusion. But if someone's still continued to do something and you're not sure, just be like, look, maybe you didn't understand, but I was really, really clear. Talk to them afterwards if you need to and pull them to one side. Say, did you understand why I asked you to not talk in the lesson? And I think that's where most people go wrong, is when we talk about, a lot of the time people get really frustrated with these restorative approaches and they just think it's about pampering to the students and hearing what they've got to say and, they'll make excuses. It's not. It's asking to check they've understood, because if you refer back to the learning, particularly if you get parents involved, and if you're really good and you get parents involved early, so you ring them up and say, look, I'm really struggling with Johnny today. Johnny just wasn't on it. He was talking throughout the lesson. I issued a sanction. I just really need your help on this, if that's at all possible, because it's affecting his learning. Would you mind coming in to meet me tomorrow and we can have a chat about it? I just think, I'm sure, and one of the things that I use with parents is you want to almost inject what you want them to agree to. So what I mean by that is you say, I'm sure you really want him to do well. What parent's going to deny that? So once you've led up to that, you say, I'm sure you really want Johnny to do well. So therefore, if you could come in and help me, that's going to be part of the process. I'm sure as a good parent like myself, I'm a parent, so I'd turn around. As a good parent like myself, compliment them. You would want him to do well, and this is going to help him to do well. So I really appreciate your support. Use that language. Flip it onto the parents in a positive way. So they come in for the meeting and say, look, Johnny's just talking all the time in the lesson. Johnny, why is this happening? Is there something I can do to support you? Because a lot of people don't like doing that. What they do is they go, well, why should I have to be all polite about it? Why should I be asking him and begging him to do all the right things? It's like, why would you not want to? Why would you not want it? What do you want? Do you want outcome or do you want punishment? Do you want the punitive system of just punish them? They'll do as they're told eventually once we've pulled their thumbnails off and, tortured them. No, they won't. What you've got to do is you've got to convince them to do the right thing out of their own heart, because they want to do the right thing. Most students don't actually want to cause those problems. They just get drawn into it. So if you have that dialogue and say, look, when you're talking the lesson, I find it really hard to teach. It's disturbing the learning of others. If there's something I can do to help you, what can I do? Tell me what I can do to help you and support you. Oh, well, and more often than not, some students, there's an underlying need. And I'm not saying that I get a bit annoyed when some parents jump on this. So those needs aren't being met all the time. Sometimes those are genuine reasons. But other times, it's just that they could just be struggling, and other times they can use it as an excuse as well, but they could be struggling. They might be that they say, well, just where I'm sat at the moment, I really struggle with this. Okay, well, I'm happy to move you, but it's got to be a compromise. It can't be that you're going to sit with Billy, your mate, and then you're going to cause problems all afternoon. It's about if you're sitting near the front where you're more easily accessible by me, so you can ask me questions, and use things like, if they don't want to, it's like, if you don't want to put your hand up in the lesson, is that something that bothers you? You don't want to look silly. Okay, well, how about when I just turn around and say, anybody got any questions they want me to look at? And you look at them directly and just kind of go, and say, just give me a little. You don't have to put your hand up and just be like, oh, right, well, maybe I need to just go over that then, just to be really sure that we've got that. That's one reason why I use dry whiteboards in my lessons. So with maths, it's easier. They write their answers on the boards, they show them, so I can see all those things. I can't, when people can't do stuff, I say things like, put a question mark on your board. Don't show it to anybody else. Put the board up, question mark on there. Great. We know that there's a problem. Don't need to show them up in front of anybody else. Just say, right, I'm just going to go through it for a few others. If you know what you're doing, the rest of you can get on with these questions here, but I'm just going to go through a couple of more examples on the board just till we feel a little bit more secure on this, and I'll come around and check on it, and then you can go and do individual checks. So assume confusion, that they don't understand, that they're not clear. You can still issue a sanction at the end of the day, but don't just go down the punitive route of you're being defiant, I'm going to give you a sanction. Talk to them, get that response for them, and try and work out what's going wrong. Ultimately, think about outcome. What do you want from the situation? Don't think about how am I going to give a punishment. Too many times when I've launched things in schools with staff and I've done training, we'll go, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do that. And the first question is, what happens when they don't do it? What sanction are we going to give them? Yes, that does need to be there. Absolutely. But we're beginning with the thought of let's just punish them. Whereas actually what we should be doing is there any other ideas or suggestions you can give us when they don't want to do it? Is there anything I could do before we go to a sanction? That's the question that should be asked. That's the thing that we should be thinking about, is how do we get them to do it? Not, well, if we just punish them, they'll do it, because it doesn't work. And it's the same with, parenting. Like, the conversation's more important than the sanction, because the conversation is how you change the behaviour. Punishments don't work. I know myself when I was growing up, and every time I was punished, I just hated the fact. It just got me more angry. And if the student's more angry and more frustrated, they're not going to work with you. They're not going to build relationships. All they're going to do is just think, well, you're an idiot because you don't listen to me. Listening to students is not, and I want to be really clear about this, because when I talk to students, I say listening to them is not agreeing with them. It's just listening to them. And what you do is you draw from that. And if you can draw from that a win to get them to do what you want them to do, why wouldn't you do it? That's my question. why wouldn't you want to get them to do what they're supposed to do just by a compromise? It's not giving in, it's not giving them what they want. I want to be really clear on that. It's about saying, actually, you need help and support in order for you to meet my expectations. As long as it's not a ridiculous compromise, why wouldn't you do it? Like moving a student to the front of the classroom so they can see and talk to you if they've got a problem and make eye contact with you. Why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you have that dialogue with them? So a lot there, probably repeats a lot of stuff there, but I think it's really important to think about in terms of that positive framing and thinking about how we get into those language and conversations within the classroom. More videos to come on these sort of things, and we'll get some couple of other guests I've got lined up over the next few weeks, and there's going to be some videos coming out very shortly on values, so look out for that as well. We've got those in the pipeline, and some videos on PowerPoints as well. That's pretty much it for this episode. Like I say, been a while since we've done some. It's been very busy, couple of weeks and months, so we've taken a little bit of time off, but we'll be back into the swing of things with a video each week. So I hope you enjoy that, and I will look forward to seeing you next one. Take care.